You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. We are talking to Professor Elinor Ostrom, who is a professor at the Indiana University, and she is the 2009 Nobel Prize laureate in economic sciences. Professor, it's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to talk with you.
So, as I understand, you are the only woman so far who has the distinction to be the Nobel Prize winner in economics. How has being a woman, would you say, affected your progress in the field of economics?
Well, my first time position was way back in the 60s, and at that point women were not very much hired. So I've seen the discriminatory side of academia. Mm-hmm. My degree is a joint degree in political science and with an outside minor in economics. And so I've been in a political science department since mid-60s, but I've been very active in public choice and a variety of activities that are considered by many economics. So I've crossed disciplines. I am interdisciplinary from the very beginning.
So it's okay these days for me to suggest that my daughters study economics if it so interests them, they won't run up against a glass ceiling?
Well, you can suggest your daughters take academia seriously in the present tense. A few years back, that was not the case, but we've made some progress.
Okay, good. So I will. Hopefully they'll follow along. You know, my day job is that I'm an investment advisor. I do the radio show once a week. Although it's a financial show and we talk about financial topics, I do spend most of my time at Profile Investments in Jerusalem doing financial planning for people. So one of the topics that you've written on, in fact, for which you were recognized for the Nobel Prize, was what's called common pool resources.
Yes.
You know, before we go in depth, could you just give us a little description about what that's all about?
Well, I started with work on groundwater, and I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and we have a number of very important and very large groundwater basins underlying the farming and city areas right next to the ocean. Mm-hmm. And as you pull down the water in a groundwater basin near an ocean, the ocean starts coming in. And so I was studying a very severe problem, not knowing it was a commons. It was a problem of water management. And there were a very large number of pumpers, and I started attending their monthly meetings and watching them struggle. And they eventually did come up with ways of solving their problems. Then I studied public goods and policing in metropolitan areas in the U.S. for a very long time. And then in the early 1980s, people began to worry that government recommendations were for either privatizing or government regulation, as if small-scale communities that had been managing common pool resources for a very long time, forestry, pasture, irrigation, couldn't manage. And I started doing a fair amount, quite a bit of research in this area.
And your position was that these communities that had been using commons previously, that system was actually working well for them? And
many of them, not that all. But see, not all government systems work, not all private systems work. Do I have to tell you that?
Oh, no, ma'am.
And we shouldn't expect that all common pool institutions should work.
Which area does it work best? Would it be for groundwater, for fisheries?
That can't be answered.
Okay.
Because in some places on groundwater, local people aren't able to they're just not authorized to take any action. And similarly on fisheries. Now, recently there's been a fairly major article in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, written by Josiah Sinner, C-I-N-N-E-R, studying a large number of local fishery systems in the South Pacific and showing that they're working very well. And there's been some very major studies by folks at the University of Washington, again looking at fisheries and showing that it takes usually something like 7 or 8 variables to make them successful. This is not one of these things that anytime it's community organized, they are. But if they do have the 7 or 8 variables that they identify, they are frequently successful. One of those variables is local leadership, but it by itself is not sufficient. It needs to be in a cluster of other variables.
But don't people have to want to be part of this common property concept?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. As opposed to, I guess the opposite would be something where it is every man for himself and based on a more profit motive.
Or have the government come in and take it over, or
I
sell
don't like
it.
that one so much. Or sell it to people, meaning that's a private industry, right?
Yeah. And see, a lot of economics argued that for fisheries, for example, you needed to, quote, privatize. And the way that was operationalized was giving people certain amounts of fish they could collect. Mm-hmm. And they had a private right to that. So they had a right to a certain amount. Well, unfortunately, frequently what happened was when fishers then were given these rights, any fish they captured that were not in that rights, they threw overboard. It's called bycatch. And it created a rather dramatic problem of pollution. And so the private system in fisheries has not proved to be very successful. Now, in British Columbia, they have now developed a private system, but every fisherman who has rights has to have a government staff member on their fish boat for the entire time they are out. And the staff member counts what they collect and what they take back in. So that has reduced the bycatch problem, but at very high cost.
That is. We are talking to Professor Elinor Ostrom, who is a professor at Indiana University, and she's also the 2009 Nobel laureate in economic science. Among her many expertise, she's worked a lot on common pool resources, which we've been discussing now in terms of fisheries. I'd like to just understand a little more about this concept of having the example you gave in British Columbia was having a government official on board the ship. Isn't that it basically then having the government run this?
I run a lot, but the decisions about where to fish and how much to fish then are the individual fishermen's, but not decisions about bycatch. Mm-hmm. So a lot is privatized, but not everything. And the system doesn't work unless there is government observation and insurance that people are not throwing a lot of fish overboard that shouldn't be thrown overboard.
Do you think that rather than having a government body deal with this, do you think it might be possible to do it similarly to how Wall Street manages with self-regulatory organizations? Because they know the business the best.
But we found in lobster fisheries in Maine, for example, they are organized by groups of fishermen that live together on the coast. And that works very well for lobster fishermen because the lobsters don't go out in the ocean. It isn't a very effective mechanism for tuna. And our problems of the fisheries out in the international seas, tremendous problems.
Is that also because the governments simply don't agree, or the different there's a different culture in the different countries?
Well, you don't know one another. If you live on the coast in Maine, you know one another. You bring the fish back in. You can observe what's going on. But if you are fishing out in the Baltic or the mid-Atlantic as opposed to coastal, it's a huge area, and you can fish there for quite a period of time without being observed. And you can take a lot, and fishermen have. So we are the amount of loss of species in the international waters are tremendous.
Mm-hmm. As this is a personal finance show, let me see where this applies for regular people listening. Are there companies or indices in the markets that people can either invest or show their support or their lack of support for this concept by investing in companies that are dealing in this?
Probably some. I'm not very good at naming the companies, but on forestry, we've been studying it around the world. And some of the most successful arrangements for managing forests in terms of sustainability as well as local profit are community organized, common property regimes.
In some of your research, you've spoken about how in order to deal with CPR, common
problems, okay.
All right. That you have to have clearly defined boundaries. That was one of the important findings you had. So I understand with the forest is a certain size, but the ocean is rather huge. It's not.
Yeah, and that's why coastal fisheries,
I see.
They've been able to get defined borders on coastal and not in ocean fisheries. That's one of the big differences.
So if there was an ideal place for common pool resource strategy to work, do you have a global answer for this, or would you say that every case has to be looked at on its own merits?
I'd say the latter, but that we do know that a lot of irrigation systems work very well when the farmers do the management and the irrigation system is owned and managed by the farmers rather than by others. And so we found in irrigation and in forestry and in coastal fisheries a fairly large number of successes.
And ultimately, we're running out of time, but I just want to see where this is leading. A lot of governments talk the talk about global warming and environment and protecting natural resources, but they don't really walk the walk. Do you think that the research you've done is having an effect on the way the governments are actually making and enforcing policy?
To some extent, and even more on local people who had given up that they couldn't do anything about global change. And yet what we are finding is that there are many actions taken in the individual household in a small community that do reduce greenhouse gas emissions dramatically. And when you multiply those so that you get people, such and such a community, they're doing it, why can't we? When you mobilize like that, you can make a big difference.
I see. So the grassroots effort is really perhaps the only approach that will be successful, because it doesn't seem the governments really are necessarily.
Well, it will be a very important strategy among those. We do need international treaties, but besides that, we're not making much progress. And so we're wasting all sorts of time where we're putting greenhouse gas emissions up there. And some of that could be changed today.
Okay. We have been talking to Elinor Ostrom. She is a professor at Indiana University, and she has been acknowledged with her expertise in economics by the Nobel Prize Committee in 2009, where she won the Nobel Prize there. Professor, in the last few seconds, could you just tell people how can they follow your work?
Well, I don't have a Facebook or any of those sorts of modern things. I'm an old-fashioned scholar. But if one looks at Google and searches under my name, you'll find a fair number of publications that are easily available.
Okay. Okay, Professor Elinor Ostrom, thanks very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt show.